After earning the NFC's lone bye, the Seahawks don't play this upcoming weekend, but John Schneider made sure to have plenty for Seahawk fans to cheer about after winning in Santa Clara. We're going to be breaking down Charles Cross's massive extension coming up here on our Monday edition, Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate your support of the podcast. Whether you are listening in from Sumner, Washington, or down in Salt Lake City, Utah, thanks for making Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network. The Seattle Seahawks have 14 wins in tow, the number one seed in the NFC and an NFC West title. As a reward, they don't have to play this week, but John Schneider made sure there was plenty of excitement, even with the Seahawks not set to play this upcoming weekend as they enjoy their hard-earned bye. We'll be diving into Charles Cross's new contract, what that means for the Seahawks moving forward. We've got a big Monday mailbag, tons of great questions from you, our valued listeners, and Monday Musings, a deep dive after watching the All-22, what stood out to us from Seattle's NFC West clinching win at Levi's Stadium. So without further ado, let's get to it. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Even before the confetti had stopped falling and the cigars had been put out completely, John Schneider decided to give Seahawk fans another reason to be excited this weekend. Charles Cross getting a massive 4-year extension worth over $104 million. The franchise left tackle now inked to the Seahawks through the 2030 season. And Rob, we had anticipated there might be an extension coming for one of these 2022 players at the end of the season. John Schneider doesn't make a ton of moves this time of year. It's been kind of an exception to the rule when they make extensions in season. But Charles Cross, I feel like he's more than earned this. And I know some fans are going to say $26.1 million in new money for Charles Cross, a guy that hasn't been a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro. But he's only 25 years old, and I put together my first All-Pro list. I voted today, and I thought about Charles Cross for a little bit when I was looking at the tackle position because he's only given up 2 sacks all year, and I'm wondering if he wouldn't have had this hamstring injury that cost him the final 3 games. If he played well in those 3 games, who knows if he gets some votes in All-Pro voting, but he certainly took a big step forward, and because he's still a really young player, and this is such a hard position to draft and develop a quality player to protect the blind side. This seems like a home run to me, especially when you consider the 5th-year option is still in play before the new deal even starts in 2027.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head when you talked about Charles Cross and his age. I really think that that's what the Seahawks are paying for here, frankly. I mean, he has played at a, Pro Bowl kind of a level. I don't know that All-Pro has been the level of which he has played throughout much of his career, but I think that he has played at a very high level throughout much of his career. And I kind of jokingly said a couple of days ago that, my goodness, Josh Jones is playing so well that John Schneider might forget all about Charles Cross. And I certainly said that tongue in cheek because it is noteworthy when there is anybody playing the left tackle position other than Charles Cross. His durability, the fact that he is one of the league's statistically better pass protectors, and then his fit in this wide zone blocking system. I think all of those things came into play here. And then Mike McDonald got on local Seattle radio and just gushed about what Charles Cross brings to the table in terms of just his work ethic, his leadership skills. And I think that is also something that Seattle very much is acknowledging here as well. So again, I understand that there's going to be some consternation anytime we're talking about the biggest deal a team, the Seahawks have given to any non-quarterback in their franchise's history. But I also think that what a message this sends to the rest of the locker room, that if you do things the right way, including how you are working to get back onto the field when you have suffered an unfortunate injury, then you will be rewarded by this club. And I think, again, that has a huge ripple effect on the rest of the Seahawks out there who are hoping that they also are going to get extended at some point by the Seahawks.
And I think there's something else that needs to be considered here. Not just the fact that, look, I think smart teams in the NFL, they pay for future expectations. Now, obviously, a guy like Myles Garrett, 23 sacks this year, record setting, just got a massive deal last year. A guy like that, you're going to be paying for past production just as much as what you're expecting in future production. But when you're talking about a player like Charles Cross at 25, you're not just considering that. You're also considering his place in this locker room coming from a 2022 draft class that I think was an absolute game changer for the Seahawks. And I think is a big reason they are where they are right now with that number 1 seed and look like a team that's going to be around for a while competing for championships with all the young talent that they have. Charles Cross is a big part of that, but the locker room presence and the on-field presence. Look, I've interviewed Charles Cross several times. I've got to talk to him in the locker room one-on-one several times. A pretty soft-spoken guy, not somebody that's rah-rah at all. That's just not his personality. Very nice guy, and not a lot of words. But when he speaks, guys in that locker room, they listen. And when he speaks on the field, guys on the practice field, they listen. For being a 25-year-old, like he is the seasoned vet, really, of this offensive line. And that's why Seattle fans should be so excited that he is extended here. And you're going to have this continuity with so many guys still on rookie contracts there. And I didn't get to join the Zoom conference call today with Mike McDonald, but I got to go back and listen to a number of answers to questions that he had in today's press conference. And I loved what he had to say about Charles Cross, the person, because that's another big reason that he is getting the bag. Take a listen.
Well, he's got such a great spirit to him, and great teammate, just very unselfish, extremely hard worker, humble, confident, all those things. I mean, they come in all sorts of different personalities, and he's authentic to him, and I think his teammates really respect the heck out of him. He's been great for Gray since Gray walked in the door. That's what you see, and then just a great person, man. Just really is. I mean, I don't know if you've gotten to know him, but he's just a great person that we really respect, and turns out he's a great football player too.
And I love the Zabel aspect there, because now you have these two players. They are locked together for the next 3 or 4 years minimum, because Gray Zabel, you're going to have the 5th-year option eligible at the end of his contract. And Seattle had already picked that up for Charles Cross last May. And again, they don't have to do this new contract. It doesn't start until 2027. They're able to spread some of that signing bonus out a little bit more. This ends up being a somewhat team-friendly contract, Rob, when you consider how much money is being floated out there because of the structure and having that 5th-year option. But getting him and Gray Zabel now as a package, that continuity together, Seattle could have one of the best left sides in the NFL, and their offensive line for the next 3-4+ years. We know they're going to be together for at least 3. That is the most exciting thing about this entire endeavor for me, is getting those two linked to the hip on the left side of the offensive line, and John Schneider continuing to pivot towards dishing out the resources in the trenches, something that he didn't do very much in his first 13, 14 years at the helm.
Yeah, and that's one of the ways I think that John Schneider has improved, over his career here in Seattle, just recognizing some of those prior mistakes. I mean, I think that there have been times where Seattle did not prioritize their offensive line enough. And of course, there's a lot of Seahawks fans that felt that way when it came to the draft. But I mean, in retaining some of your own players. We talked about this before, Corbin, how some players who maybe struggled in Seattle and then went elsewhere, got big deals, wound up becoming quality quality starters elsewhere, whether it be a Damian Lewis, whether it be a Ethan Posick. There have been plenty of candidates there. I think that Charles Cross, to me, is one of the better young offensive tackles in all of the NFL. Obviously, the Seahawks felt that way also. But yes, I thought you nailed it when you mentioned Gray Zabel, or at least commenting after Mike McDonald mentioned Gray Zabel, because it's the combination of the two working in tandem that to me is so exciting. Longtime Seahawks fans, of course, will remember the great Walter Jones and Steve Hutchinson working in tandem. That's basically what powered, the future MVP, Sean Alexander, and the Seattle Seahawks to go to their very first Super Bowl. And just what a statement it is, where Seattle was on the precipice of hosting their very first game with a 14-3 record, and hopefully on their path to another Super Bowl, that they retain the longest tenured offensive lineman on the team, still at a very young age, who is also the most physically gifted of the bunch of Seattle's offensive linemen, at least in my opinion. He's been durable. He has been consistent. Again, he is an excellent schematic fit. I just think that this is very much a win-win for the Seahawks as well as for the player, and obviously for Seahawks fans as well.
And you got to look at the market price too. And again, $26.1 million per year, new money. Fans are going to be looking to that but he hasn't been a Pro Bowler, hasn't been an All-Pro. Seattle still believes that upside is there, and you got to be thinking about the other end of the coin. If that's the money you're not willing to spend, and then you end up in purgatory at left tackle again, you can slam shut a window to win championships by making decisions like that. So I think Seattle did exactly what they needed to do here. We'll see how this pans out down the line, but this should be one of the foundational pieces. We've talked about this for months. This should be one of the foundational pieces that Seattle wants to keep locked up as they try to be a perennial contender in the NFC. When we come back, we've got mailbag coming your way. Tons of great questions from you, our valued listeners. We'll answer as many as we can. Coming up next, Monday edition, Locked On Seahawks. Guys, it's 2026, and those days of waiting for something to become a full-blown emergency before you see a doctor, they're over. No more walking it off for 6 months. No more pretending that weird shoulder stiffness is just sleeping wrong. It takes time to take your health seriously, and ZocDoc makes that easier than ever, because staying healthy is more than hitting the gym or eating right. It's about actually getting things checked out when something feels off. Real appointment times are listed, including same-day visits on ZocDoc. No more back-and-forth phone calls or waiting weeks to be seen. Super helpful for routine checkups and those little issues you've been meaning to get checked out. So stop putting off doctor's appointments and get the care you need. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Hey guys, the draft picks positions are all set, and so many teams are looking for their franchise quarterback. Ever wish to become a pro QB, getting drafted first overall by the Raiders? Well, now you can. There's a mobile game just for you called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a #1 draft pick quarterback, and it's your job to lead your team to greatness to help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is the #1 QB career game mode on the mobile app store, and it introduces the most realistic environment with full career control. You can sign contracts, train and upgrade yourself, build chemistry and evolve with your teammates, give input to your GM on roster moves, play the actual games in 2D, and rise through the ranks to become a pro football legend. You'll deal with the ups and downs of a QB career, from rookie nerves to playoff drama, and every choice shapes your journey. Ultimate QB is totally free to play, has no ads, and works 100% offline. Perfect for when you want to sneak in a quick game or two on the go. Just head on over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com. Or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. And we've got something special just for you guys. Use the promo code LOCKEDON, all caps, in the game store to get a free boost at the start of your career. Ultimate QB, Football Legend QB1. It's your legacy. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free by joining the Everydayer Club and getting Locked On Seahawks with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonseahawks.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, Rob, let's open up the mailbag. We got tons of questions from our valued listeners. First one coming from Xavier Mitchell on X. After a great improvement in the run game the last 3 weeks, what have you seen from the O-line that has made it better? Do you think the Seahawks have finally found a consistent run game?
I think that they have, but I also think that goes back longer than just 3 weeks. Because I think that if you just look at the 3 weeks, then you would say, hey, Josh Jones has been at left tackle rather than the aforementioned Charles Cross. And I think that Jones's mobility, as well as the mobility of Gray Zabel and Jalen Sandell in particular, those three and the way that they have worked together, I think definitely has played a role in that. As I'm going to be talking about a little bit later, I think that Sam Darnold's increasing willingness to tuck the ball and run has made it a little bit more of a challenge for opposing defenses as well.
Yeah, I would agree on that. I think that, and we'll talk a little bit later, I got a few players that I think we need to shout out that I think have had a big impact on this, but to me, it's been more than 3 weeks. It doesn't just randomly pop. There's a build up to that. And I think the Seahawks run game is definitely a case of that. Hawks Ninja here on Blue Sky. Why are the Seahawks struggling in the red zone? It feels like the offense is very conservative in the passing game and working around Sam's limitations too much. I think there have been too many times that Clint Kubiak has been too cute when they've gotten down into the red zone. And I'll just look at that 1st and goal after the Jackson Smith and Jigba defensive pass interference on that opening drive. Like, here's the thing. Sam Darnold could have dumped that off to Zach Charbonnet, and he probably walks into the end zone for a touchdown on that play-action pass. I still think Seattle should have just kept grounding and pounding it. San Francisco had no answer for their run game on that drive and most of this game. Third quarter had a few counters, and then Seattle kind of punched them back at the end of the game. But that just felt like one where you set the tone, you keep setting the tone, and finish it. You get 4 plays at the goal line to punch it in. I think you set the tone physically and make a statement to the other team. And so I think that's been an issue. And I also think Torrey Horton, this is where they have missed Torrey Horton the most. He had 5 touchdowns on, I believe, 13 catches before his injury. He was incredibly valuable in the red zone or just outside of the red zone, making big plays for the Seahawks. They've missed his size in the receiver department when they've been inside the 20-yard line. I think Sam Darnold has certainly missed having him out there. It doesn't sound like they're going to have him back for the playoffs either, unfortunately. But they have been a little bit more consistent down there the last few games than they were in a lull in the middle of the season. I still think A.J. Barner, and the fact they've gotten 12 rushing touchdowns out of Zach Charbonnet, they've been effective enough running the football in those situations. That's another reason I'm like, why did you not run the ball 1st and goal there, especially with the way they have been running all series long. So I think they sometimes just outthink themselves a little bit in those situations. Elo Tato on X. Am I the only one who can see Anthony Bradford getting an extension this offseason? It's clear the coaching staff loves him and Schneider is infatuated with him. This just feels like a player Schneider wants to keep around. Like, I don't know if John Schneider is infatuated with Anthony Bradford. However, I don't think this is a question that we should be scoffing at, because I think John Schneider wants to see this entire offensive line play together for several years in a row, and I don't think re-signing Anthony Bradford would be that expensive.
I don't think it would be that expensive. I think that the timing would be interesting, just because this feels like one of the relative strengths of, in my opinion, of this upcoming draft class is interior offensive linemen, and I think also tackles at the collegiate level who are going to wind up moving inside to guard. That said, I do think that the Seahawks should very strongly be considering bringing Bradford back for much the same reason we talked about before with Charles Cross. I got so so excited to kind of talk about his youthful age. Anthony Bradford is, I believe, even younger.
He's 24,
yeah. Yeah, exactly. So he's 24 years old. That's the thing. I mean, there's a number of talented offensive linemen that I'm evaluating for the 2026 draft that are 23, 24 years old right now. I think Bradford is, he is certainly always going to be a little bit of a lightning rod for fans out there because, as we've talked about so many times, when he makes mistakes, the mistake is so colossal, everybody can see it. At the same time, you think about some of the biggest, strongest, just immovable objects that play along the defensive line. And Anthony Bradford, the right guard position, has often been the Seahawks lineman who has had to take on the Jeffrey Simmons of the world, potentially the Jalen Carters of the world. Some of these big, strong guys that maybe aren't quite as susceptible to the quick guys, but they struggle with mano-a-mano kind of power. That's what Bradford provides. In my opinion, he is the most physical of Seattle's offensive linemen, maybe with a little bit of a tip of the cap to Abe Lucas as well at the right tackle position. But I think that this is a case where Seattle's left side is so damn athletic. Their right side is so powerful and so just ornery, nasty. I do think that this is offensive lineman, to your point, Corbin, that I think that John Schneider would like to retain for the long term.
Sea Cyclones on Blue Sky. Drew Lock has closed 5 games for the Seahawks this year. Does this tell you anything about their plans with Jalen Milroe? Are they less invested in his development now that Sam Darnold is playing so well? Now, I don't think they're any less invested in the development of Jalen Milroe, but Drew Lock was the number 2 guy coming into the season. There was no doubt about that. They signed him to a 2-year contract. John Schneider, that is a guy that I think John Schneider's infatuated with. He's brought him back twice. I mean, he loves having Drew Lock in the locker room. He likes having him as the number 2 QB. I think he could start for a few of the teams in the league. So they're more confident in him, at least right now. That doesn't mean next year that Jalen Milroe couldn't show up and overtake him or push him for that number 2 job. He just wasn't ready to do that this year. So I'm not surprised that Milroe hasn't gotten snaps in those games. And most of the games he hasn't been able to anyway because he's been the emergency QB, and both the QBs in front of him would have to be hurt for him to even play. So he hasn't been able to do that. So I don't think there's anything to do with the development of him. It's just Drew Lock is the number 2 guy. And when they've had blowout games like that, that's the player that you were paying to play in those situations. Max NFL on X. What is more likely, Rob? Clint Kubiak becomes a head coach for another team next year, or Adam Durde becomes a play-calling defensive coordinator for another team next year?
Frankly, I don't think either one of those are very likely. And I think that Clint Kubiak deserves all of the head coaching opportunities that he may get. And I've never had a conversation myself with Clint Kubiak, but everybody I've talked to that does speak to Kubiak and has had conversations with him. I've kind of just talked about the fact that he is kind of a low-key, kind of, humble, quiet personality to him. And I just look at some of the coaching jobs that are out there, whether it be Las Vegas, whether it be in New York. I just see some big market teams that are going to want kind of a rah coach. I don't know that Clint Kubiak is a great fit as a head coach. I think he's one of the better offensive coordinators in all of the NFL. As I often say, the proof is in the pudding, and we just have to think back to what this offense looked like last year and what it looks like this year for the Seahawks. So I'm a huge fan of Clint Kubiak. I'm a huge fan of Adam Durde as well. But my goodness, when you have the number 1 rated defense in all of the NFL, why would you consider changing anything? Let Mike McDonald do whatever the hell he wants to do because the success has been obvious. So, look, I respect both these coaches. I think they both deserve an awful lot of credit for the success that the Seahawks have had. I think Seattle would be crazy to allow either one of these guys to get out of Seattle unless they were giving that head coaching promotion. So I do think that it's more likely that both of them are retained by Seattle in 2026 and that much more success for the Seahawks in the future.
And our last question coming from Bryson on Threads, over under on how many all-pros Seattle has. Well, you can check on EmeraldCitySpectrum.com. You can see how many Seahawks I picked for the first team all-pro. All of that is on our website. As far as what I expect in terms of when all the votes come in, I'm going to go over 3.5. I think Seattle gets 4 All-Pros. And whether they're all first-teamers or they have a guy, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked, Rob, if they have 2 first-teamers and they have 2 second-teamers. Like, that's probably what we're looking at. But they're a 14-win team. They should absolutely be represented that way as such with some of the best in the National Football League. So, but I'm going to go above. I'm going to go over 3.5 there with 4 as my call here. When we come back, hey, we haven't talked about that big win on Saturday night, Rob. It's time for us to dish out our Monday musings after watching the All-22, revisiting the game. That's coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new, boosts, bonuses, and surprises. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. And the timing's perfect, right before the games, right before the weekend starts. So before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in, and thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Seahawks getting their first NFC West crown since 2020 and their first number 1 seed and bye week since 2014 with a 13-3 victory over the 49ers on Saturday night. And Rob, this was one of those games, and I felt this way coming out of the game, and then after watching the film, I felt even more so this way, that this was one of those games that was not near as close as what the scoreboard indicates. I mean, Seattle should have had at least 3 points on the opening possession. They had 2 missed field goals by Jason Myers. There were a lot of missed opportunities for them to blow this game open. And I talked about it on Friday when I was making my prediction. I ended up picking Seattle win by 8, but I was thinking multiple scores. I thought Seattle could do that, and they probably should have done that in this game. They still get the win. They win by 10. I felt like this was a game they could have won by 17 to 20 points. I felt they could have won it fairly comfortably. That being said, it is still an impressive win, and to do it in Santa Clara against a team that had been red hot and had won 6 straight games themselves, I think that's a testament to what the Seahawks have accomplished this year, where they have won a ton of games. They won 5 games against teams that won 10 or more games this regular season. So that speaks to the strength of schedule and them stepping up against that competition this year.
No question about it. I mean, we just saw the best team in the NFL. That's not my opinion. The statistics say the same thing. The best team in the NFL flex and want exact some revenge on a team that, I thought the 49ers were fortunate to escape Seattle in week 1 with that victory. And I was just as confident as you were that Seattle not only was going to win this game, but perhaps do it by multiple scores. Had Jason Myers made those 2 field goals, the 19-3 would have been, the final tally. I think that to me is about what this game felt like. And you could make the argument that Seattle's defense, of course, didn't even really give up the field goal. Jason Myers had kick the ball out of bounds, gave them a short field. That's the only reason San Francisco was able to move the ball long enough to get themselves any points whatsoever. I just thought that it was an absolutely dominant performance, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But because it is a couple of days since the end of this game, I wanted to kind of dig a little bit deeper than some of the obvious standouts. And, I keep hearing Sam Darnold's name being thrown out there as like they won despite Sam Darnold. And I know that his statistics weren't overly impressive. I'm going to focus in on a statistic here that is probably the least impressive of what Sam Darnold was able to do. And yet I would argue that it was absolutely critical to the success that Seattle had. Sam Darnold, I thought, kind of his mobility specifically, I thought stole the spotlight from one of the things in which Brock Purdy is typically known for being able to do, and that's buying time with his legs. And if you just look at the statistics, Sam and that's also acknowledging the 3 kneel downs that Sam Darnold had. He essentially had 2 rushes for 9 yards. Brock Purdy had 2 rushes for 21 yards. So obviously the numbers suggest that Brock Purdy was more effective. However, in Brock Purdy's 2 different runs, both times he went feet first, and both times Sam Darnold went head first. I think that sent a message right off the bat to his teammates. I thought that Sam Darnold getting the 3rd down conversion early in the second quarter, runs for 5 yards, again, buries his head down, takes a bit of a shot, but helps convert that. The 2nd and 8 midway through the 4th quarter, he runs for 6 yards, but because the 49ers linebackers were forced to now step up when Sam Darnold would escape out into the out past the pocket and run to the right, and he was able to create a throwing lane where he hit Cooper Kupp for that 24-yard gain. That was one of the biggest plays in that entire football game for Seattle on the offensive side of the ball. Purdy, on the other hand, I thought looked a little bit skittish and certainly not running with the authority in which we have seen him in the past. His long run, 11 yards, was the long run for the 49ers in the entire game. And it was essentially meaningless at that point in the contest. So, again, I just thought that I've talked about this before. If you are a visiting team and you do what the opponent thinks is their strength and you do it even better than they do, talk about humbling a team and their crowd. That's exactly what Seattle did. And so, again, Sam Darnold's mobility statistically wasn't very impressive, but I think that it sent a message to his teammates and certainly to the 49ers that the Seahawks were going to be the more dominant team on the ground. And considering all the success the 49ers have typically running the football, that's saying an awful lot.
Yeah, and the stats might not have been there for Sam Darnold running the football, but there were a number of plays that he extended plays and was able to get the ball out. The Cooper Kupp completion towards the end of the game for 24 yards was a great example. Escaping the pocket out to his right, but still looking to throw. He bought time for Kupp to get open and then unloaded it to him, and that was a huge play. Even though Seattle didn't end up scoring on that drive, it allowed them to keep chewing more clock, and inevitably that just really put the dagger into the 49ers. The part of the game the Seahawks did have the stats, though, was running the football with their backs. 170 rushing yards between Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet. And to me, when we had the mailbag question about what's really clicked for this run game, and I think it's been more than the last 3 games. I think this has been kind of an incremental improvement. You have to remember, Rob, in the middle of the year, they had 5 straight games with 100 rushing yards. So it's not like this just came out of nowhere and they hadn't ran the ball well at any point this season. They just were more inconsistent in those games. They have been the last 3 where largely they are just winning in the trenches. Their running backs are creating after contact. They're making guys miss. The whole machine is humming. But I think a big reason for this resurgence, it's the 3 guys in the middle of this offensive line. And I cannot say enough. I'm going to have my grade card dropping tomorrow morning for the game on Saturday on Emerald City Spectrum. I'm just wrapping up some of my all-22 stuff. But I'm just going to give you guys a spoiler here. My number 1 graded player coming out of this game was not a defensive player. It was on offense. Jalen Sundell was utterly dominant in this football game. He was getting to the second level, getting guys on skates. He was turning guys in the line of scrimmage and sealing them to spring running backs. He was actually knocking dudes off the ball fairly consistently with power. And we know his ability to get out on sweeps and get after guys. There was a run that Ken Walker III had that he was 25 yards downfield and was pushing a guy. I mean, the athleticism. I thought Jalen Sundell was the best player on the field on either side of the ball. I just thought from start to finish. Gray Zabel was excellent too, and he's continuing to play well. Had a really nice block on a 20-yard screen play to Ken Walker, pancaked a guy. But Jalen Sundell, to me, had the most complete game. I thought Anthony Bradford played really well for the most part as well, and he's given up 1 sack in the last 10 games. Like, that's indisputable. Like, you can't refute that. Like, he has done a lot of good things. I think the interior offensive line is a big part of that. As for the defensive side of the football, my big takeaway coming out of the film, I think Derek Hall is the X factor. I'm not even going to say maybe. I think he is the X factor for this Seattle Seahawks team to hoist the Lombardi in February. They've got all that talent on defense, and yet I think Derek Hall still has the most upside of that group. And he came in, I thought he was going to do this coming off of suspension. He was playing angry on Saturday night. And if you've got him rushing the passer the way that he did in that game, anything close to that to go with everything else that they have, he's the guy that puts that defense over the top and takes them to another level. They do that in the playoffs. Good luck to anybody coming into Lumen Field when he's got the crowd noise behind him. I think Derek Hall is the X factor for this team to win it all.
Oh, I can't disagree. I mean, he just plays with a different level of physicality, raw power, and youth. I mean, DeMarcus Lawrence plays with physicality. Boye Mafe, to me, remains the quickest off the snap. But Derek Hall kind of combines all of those things. And I'll say this. It's a lot easier to rush the quarterback when you have the reliable tackling around you. And that is, to me, is one of the most intriguing developments that I've seen over the 2 years, which Mike McDonald has been the head coach for the Seahawks, taking over for Pete Carroll. Now, I mentioned this with, it's kind of bittersweet because we're talking about Pete Carroll on the day in which he was released by the Las Vegas Raiders. And so it's quite possibly the end of Pete Carroll's time as a head coach at any level. And I have such great respect for Coach Carroll. I do believe that he should be in the Hall of Fame someday. Will he ever get there? I don't know. But there's no doubt about it. Towards the end of his time in Seattle, the Seahawks were plagued with missed tackles. We talked so much about the different things that the Seahawks should be doing to become a better open field tackling team. I don't know there's a better open field tackling team in all of the NFL, Corbin, than what the Seahawks are right now, which is remarkable when you consider the turnover that they've had at safety, at linebacker in particular. I know if you look at statistics, Seattle does not rank that highly. I looked at Pro Football Reference and BetMGM did some articles on this exact subject. Seattle is very much middle of the pack, and I just throw that stuff out the window because there's just been too many times against dynamic skill position players that Seattle one-on-one in the open field, Ty Okada or Drake Thomas have been able to kind of get these guys down to the ground, much less Seattle's absolute superstars. So again, I think that is one of the key differences of why Seattle in the last several years of Pete Carroll's time, that they were kind of a perpetual disappointment in big games, whereas Mike McDonald's team feels like one of the cleanest operations, at least when it comes to open field tackles in all of the league.
As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, hey, Tell the Truth Tuesday. It's going to be awards edition. Rob, you and I are going to be dishing out our all-pro teams. So if you didn't see all of my picks, you get to see them compared to Rob's as well. We're going to have some real fun with that as the Seahawks head into a bye week. Going to be a really fun episode. Make sure to listen in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.